Welcome back to the Justice Factor Special as we discuss Nelson Mandela with my guest, Cheryl Carolus, a leading member of the UDF and later ANC Deputy Secretary General, and Sports Minister Fikile Mbalula, former president of the ANC Youth League. Fikile Mbalula, what did you as a young person, a member of the ANC, feel when Chris Hani was murdered in 1993? And did you feel the influence of Nelson Mandela on that particular event?
We were in a car, I don't know where we're driving to. But there came the news.
That's what the youth do.
Yes. There came the news in the radio, Chris is passed on, killed. Anger, and then, you don't know what to do at that particular moment because we had arms. We're belonging to a structure called the South African Youth Congress. That was not an organization, it was a boomerang. Peter Mugabe called it that. So we had arms, Comrade Cheryl, UDF and all of that. But we had arms which were trained. So we didn't know what to do, what is the next command. And there appeared Madiba and say that keep focused. And this is what Chris Hani would have wanted. Keep focused, don't be misled by the events of this time. Our strategic objective is to win the war, and that is the freedom of our people. And
I remember that day because I was a young reporter, I was at the Star, and I thought, it's over. How can you go for the most militant, one of the most loved leaders of the ANC? What happened? Where were you? What did you feel when Nelson Mandela went on television the day after?
You know, I was actually in Mozambique, and it was the Easter weekend, and Malala, I was on Inyaka Island on holiday. And Malala walked across, and she just walked around. She said there was nobody speaking English. Something terrible had happened, and everybody was speaking Portuguese. And ourselves and Malala just got on the next aeroplane, and we came back. And it was just the most horrendous thing. And I think what Comrade Fikile said is, it was one of those moments with Tata's leadership. And that's when you see the extraordinariness of this very humble leader of ours. Because he knew that it was an act of provocation. And we all know the history now, that in fact they hoped that the right-wing elements hoped that they would derail the talks. And that's Madiba's thing, is knowing which battles to pick, and so that you can win the war. And if he needed to be quite tough and firm, he would do that. I think we remember how he drew a line with F.W. de Klerk when he thought he was being dishonest in the negotiations. And Madiba is an incredibly loyal, wise leader, but do not betray the trust and do not act in what he believes lacks integrity and honesty. That was a line you don't cross with him.
I remember the images from that. He was absolutely boiling, and the words what he said to F.W. de Klerk about the third force and so forth, it was incredible. Did you ever see that anger? Did you ever feel that anger from Nelson Mandela?
Yes, I mean, especially when confronting the reality of the enemy, that is seeking to derail the process of struggle and the revolution. Madiba will come out tops, but at the same time he had an answer. So it was not a question of unguided militancy and unguided anger and leading people astray. I went to Palestine, and I said that the Palestinians had an opportunity to realize their freedom, but they declared the second intifada. Long live the struggle of the Palestinian people. But I think if it was a Nelson Mandela, that struggle needed somebody who stood out and basically provided leadership. Nelson Mandela was not afraid to give leadership. I mean, come to think about it, we embrace him as a collective and all of that. But some of the decisions, demagogues, charlatans, leaders that we have, will not be free. Probably this country could have gone to a civil war because just the word negotiations was a dangerous vocabulary that nobody did not want in the ANC. But Madiba, a militant activist, young revolutionary democrat, rising through the ranks of the African National Congress, a commander of Umkhonto weSizwe, when the moment came that we must negotiate, he did not pull back. Neither to confront his comrades about the reality that, comrades, let's do this. It is proper.
In fact, you know, Comrade Fikile, something you remember all the time when it was a give and take thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Madiba would listen. I mean, that's also something that was just really great about him. Often in NEC meetings, National Executive Committee meetings, he will actually really sit and listen. And he understood his role as a leader was also to work out how far he could push his comrades and how far you could push the other side. And at some point he said to us, when we said, no, this is a sellout, lots of times we called him a sellout in the negotiations process. And he said something very wise to me, and he said to me, Comrade Cheryl, you do not talk, you talk to your friends, you negotiate with your enemy. We are sitting down with people whom we know are the enemy. But if it was our friends, then of course we're gonna just win it straight out. But when you're negotiating, they're going to have to give some and you're going to have to give some. We know that both of us had aspects of state power that the other party had no hope in hell of ever gaining. And so there was a stalemate and we had to give and take. But it was the wisdom of knowing where you draw the line.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about, and we're running out of time, but you know, I've always been amazed by Mandela's sense of principle. So he goes to Cuba and he says, Fidel Castro is a friend of mine, despite the fact that the US and so forth, he goes and hugs Muammar Gaddafi. You know, he stands by his own decisions. I've always been amazed by his ability to say, well, this is your issue, this is my issue, and he goes and does it.
It is a leader that I've just talked about. No populism, no chance taker. In our lingo, we say Madiba being a young Nulati. You know, I mean, he stood for the principle, for what the movement stood for, that these people are our friends. But America, imperialist aggression against Cuba did not mean that we must bend and then basically say that, no, they are not our friends. He lived up to that. We are friends with Cuba, we are friends with China, and all of that. If you remember, one of the interesting things in Madiba's diplomatic engagement internationally and all of that, was the question of China and Taiwan. And Taiwan was doing all sorts of things to make us feel good and then recognize them and all of that. The time came where Madiba, despite what the Taiwanese would have done even for the ANC to support us and all of that, but there came a time there was one China policy, no movement, no populism. It was done, and Madiba stood out for that, and that was it.
Cheryl Carolus, your final thoughts on Nelson Mandela?
He was just a very decent human being. You alluded to his loyalty, but the fact that he just loved people and he felt very deeply. I remember once walking in a township with him, we went door to door, and he came out and he was so upset and he said, you know, you can actually smell the poverty in this township. And I wish we remember that.
Cheryl Carolus, Fikile Mbalula, thanks so much, both of you, for your time.
Thank you very much.
And that's how we come to the end of this special Justice Factor edition. Nelson Mandela, freedom fighter, has died. How na ya tshwanang le yena.
News that moves. ENCA.com.